Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
Do you want to talk about rituals, which is kind of the thing we're doing right now?
Yeah, let's talk about things that you do repetitively at the beginning and end of stuff.
Interesting. I think this is the part where I say, cue music. And welcome to another episode of Panda's Talking Games. I'm one of your hosts, Phil.
And I am your other host, Senda. And for tonight's topic, Andrew Dacey in the Slack room on our Misdirected Mark Slack channel asked us to talk about rituals in your RPG session. So that seemed cool. There was a lot of discussion around it. It was very cool discussion around it. We thought we would chat about it because we have some thoughts.
To be clear, we are not talking about like ritual magic or anything.
Right.
Okay.
We are not talking about rituals as in festivals, ceremonies, magic, etc. in your game. We are talking about at the table meta rituals.
Yes.
That you can employ to improve the quality of your game session.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay, well, Phil, speaking of which, maybe you could actually define rituals for us. Definition, Panda.
Yeah. So let's do the straight up dictionary definition, which is a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order.
Yes.
Now, cool. Let's do the RPG version of that because I'm just going to chop off the first part of that definition.
Yeah.
And we're just going to go with a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order at the beginning or ending of your session.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that is, and I want to note two words here because this will be different. And this is what makes it a ritual, right? So it's a series of actions, which means that there's one or more actions and they are done in a particular order. Mm-hmm. Okay. And those are the two most important things, right? It's the series of actions and prescribed order.
Yeah.
If you just do some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, but you just kind of do them willy-nilly, like that's not really a ritual. Like that's just you getting your game started, right? Like not every game has a ritual to start and end, but every game can have a ritual to start and end. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It is definitely a thing that is an optional thing if you wish to employ it.
It absolutely is. I have in the past have done rituals in different games for different reasons. And we'll talk about some of those tonight. I've done some very formal things. I've done more informal things, but I have had various rituals over the years for different games, primarily the start of games. I don't typically ritualize the end of my game quite as much, but very much at the start. And we'll talk about reasons why you might want to do that. Cool?
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, that's the next thing we were going to talk about is actually why do you do them? And so will you elaborate?
I will elaborate with your assistance.
Well, yeah, no, but start us off. I mean, or I can jump in for a little bit. Wow. There's a frog living in my throat tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about making something like the beginning or end of your game into a ritual is that it means that there are things that you want to make sure that you do every time, and ritualizing them can make them into a habit so that you don't forget. And so it can help with table culture a lot, right? Because it sets a social contract piece on the table every time you start or end a game. And it basically is a good way to set expectations. Like, these are all things that you can do in other ways. But if you are playing with people for a long time and you want to have like 3 things that you do for shorthand to remind everybody about, XYZ, and to bring them together and back into this moment, then, that's the kind of thing that rituals are good for.
Yeah, I mean, rituals are a really good way to create boundaries, like to denote the changing of one phase to another. So, for instance, we could use a ritual to denote the changing of the social portion of the pregame to the getting into our game, like getting into character, getting back into the story, and getting ready to like resume play. And likewise, we can use a ritual to do the exact opposite of that, right? We can have a ritual to note the end of play and the beginning of exiting the play space and kind of moving into more of the meta play, discussions and feedback. And we're going to talk about specific things that could go in there because we're being purposely vague at this point in the show. But going through those things that eventually transition us back to our social time and the end of the game.
Right. And it's I would consider it from the perspective of transitional time in a lot of ways, that we put it at the beginning and the end. And I don't know if this is true for all humans. I can only truly speak for myself in that I am a creature who appreciates set expectations and transitional moments, if that makes sense. Like, I don't always deal super well with like sudden change when I am not expecting it. So things like rituals can work really well in terms of, creating that transitional space. For people like me who are anxious.
Sure. I mean, I'm Catholic, so like rituals and transitions and things like that's a whole mass, right? Like a mass is nothing more than a series of connected rituals in its own ritual that creates a set of expectations that kind of lets you know where the mass is going.
Right, wrapped in a big stained glass window with a bow on top.
Yeah, it's very much a thing, right? Like as a quick aside, when I was, there was a point in my life where I was very much into going to church, and I had not for a very long time. And so when I went back, I went and was confirmed as an adult. One of the things that like you learn, which you kind of learned as a kid, but when you learn it as an adult, you learn it differently, is like how the mass is made up. And it becomes apparent very quickly that the whole thing is very normalized and creates a set of expectations. Like this, and then this, and then this, and then it's time to leave, right? Like it is a very much a set of expectations, and it makes sure. And again, this is one of the things you had just said. It makes sure that you don't forget to do any of those things.
Right. And the thing that I think that you actually just emphasized by describing that is that rituals are comfortable to humans because they set expectations.
Sure, because we humans
keep us all on track.
Right, because we humans love patterns, right?
We do.
Humans
we
love
like
patterns, right?
Makes us feel in control.
Yeah, repeatable patterns are predictable. We like predictability in things, right? So rituals have that very comfortable feel. All right, so we've talked about rituals as a transition thing. We've talked about rituals as kind of reinforcing things. What else do we have on the list? What's the next? Do we have another one on the list?
We have a bunch of things on the list, but so I think that the thing I want to circle back real fast and just say, rituals as a transitional space is something that I would consider to apply to both beginnings and ending rituals.
Oh, yeah.
And then from here, we're going to kind of lay out a little bit more what we consider to be beginning ritual fodder versus end ritual fodder, right?
Yeah, and I don't think these are absolutes, because anytime we deal in absolutes, someone will tweet us and be like, I totally put this in my other, in my end ritual or something. But I would like to say that what we're going to do next is we're going to generalize the kinds of things that you could put into a beginning ritual, followed by the kinds of things you could put into an end ritual. And I think the important part is you are not required to put all of these in.
Yep.
You are not required to put them in the order by which we name them.
Yep.
You are, and we'll talk about making your own rituals. These are just things that could be in your ritual.
Is. And you are not required to not think up your own and put them in. And let
Thank
us
you.
know if
Right.
you
This
do,
is
'cause
not an
what the heck?
exhaustive list.
What did we
either.
miss? Tell us.
Absolutely.
Tweet us.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the big ones I think for beginning a ritual is it's a good way to sort of initiate. You've done the transition, right? So it's a good way to capture everyone's attention at the table.
Absolutely.
And I know that you've done this in your game because you talk about your Three Musketeers game where you had like the little opening trailer.
I did.
And to me, that seems like this.
This is I've done a couple of different ones to create focus, but sure, the opening credits, which was terribly fun to make, right? Like it was a weekend's worth of work because at the time I did it, I sucked at any kind of video editing, and I was using bootlegged Three Musketeer movies. Like I used all three of the existing Three Musketeer movies to make this thing: the Disney Musketeer, the other movie called The Musketeer, and the one with the airships, right? Like, I used all of those. I don't know. Have you ever seen the one with the airships?
I was just thinking, I don't know if I have. What's that one?
Extremely. It's also the Three Musketeers. It has Mila Jovovich in it. We'll talk about it in the after show. Remind me of that.
Sure, but I'm into airships, so.
Oh, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's not a great movie, but I don't think you'll be disappointed. And the fights are actually really good. Okay, anyway.
Brilliant.
So yes, to tack onto what you're saying, without a doubt, one of the things your rituals can do is, and I know this is true for me, like my table, like everybody will be sitting, chatting, telling jokes or whatever, and then I need everybody to start getting into playing. And so these rituals can kind of like get everybody like starting to focus right?
Yes.
Which I guess also goes hand in hand with, I also then want everyone to, and this is, I think, focus is one part, and the next one that dovetails onto that is to start rolling. Not dice, but like getting into their role.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that's the extension of once you have everybody's attention and focus, I need everybody to start getting into character.
Start thinking character-wise. Yeah, absolutely.
What's next on our list?
Well, you can also use it to reinforce your table culture. And I think a big part of that one is safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so, mentioning at the beginning of your game, every game, your safety stuff, whatever makes sense for your table, whether that means, hey, just a reminder of the X cards on the table, or whether that means, hey, were there any lines and veils that anyone wanted to add or adjust? Here's what we've got for right now. Or if that's just, hey, we're going to practice the okay check-in real quick. Or any other thing that you want to mention about your table culture, the reminder of an open table if people need to leave, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think it's a good place to insert that information. Or if you just have expectations, like if there is a table expectation that you will not look at your cell phone, quick reminder to people, just nice at the beginning so that you don't have to get mad at people later. Awesome. Right? Like
this would also be a good place for content warning.
Oh, yeah.
So
super good place.
Hey, tonight's episode includes the following content warnings.
Yep. Yeah.
The other thing, because I'm going off list here.
One of us can see the list, the other one can't.
The other one's going off a list from his head. So one of the other things it can do is that you can kind of set up any pre-game mechanics. So sometimes in games, like I've had players for secret rolls, I used to do things like roll a bunch of times and, give me your list of rolls or whatever. But like whether people have spell decks that they need to like get set up, like, make sure you pick your spells for tonight, that kind of like any of your pre-game mechanical things that need to be done can be done as part of this ritual.
Right. And I think one of the other really important things that's related to that is you can also use that time and space to specifically catch everyone up, like do the run through of like,
oh yeah,
last time at this table, whatever that is. Previously on my campaign. And sometimes that means you, the GM, say, here's what happens. And sometimes that means you, the GM, says, okay, guys, what did you do last time?
Yep. Or somewhere in the middle.
Right. Yeah. So that one I think is another big one. And I think that's one that like lots of us do, but don't necessarily consider a ritual.
Yeah. The recap is, the recap is very important. I mean, I play bi-weekly. So for me, the recap is very important because 2 weeks have passed and everybody needs to remember where we are before we get into play.
Yes, that is the one that my group always does too, because we also play biweekly. So, yeah. So those are kind of that's the broad list of things that we thought of as very useful for beginning rituals.
Sure.
And then we also thought of some stuff that was potentially useful. I will say potentially, because again, do as you will with this information.
We're going to get to that part shortly.
Yeah, I know. So we also thought of some things that we would consider good for RPG rituals that are more maybe ending ritual stuff, right? Because again, you can use this ritual as a transitional space back out of your play space into more social time or leaving the table or whatever that is, right? And one of those things that can be important, and it depends on what kind of game you're playing, is processing feelings, right? Because if you just finished playing a game and it was really amazing, but really intense, or like your Senda and you just finished playing Cartel and it was wild, then like, taking some time just to process like the emotional roller coaster or whatever those emotions were from that game as a group, as a table among people who also were there and saw what happened and also experienced that story, I feel like can be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes hand in hand with de-rolling is another one, right? Like it's time to transition out of your character. Now, if your group plays like, a really immersive style game, then, having a ritual to kind of signal like, hey, it's time to kind of come back from your character back to, back to this level, the game level or your personal level, that kind of thing. So that can also be part of this.
Right. And the more LARPs I play, the more that I see some of these things really specifically in LARP, because being physically inhabiting some of that space can make it more intense.
Sure.
And so it's really important to sort of de-roll some of that physicality along with the emotional stuff out of it. So it's just a thing, like, right? Like it totally works at tables, and I do it at my table game. A lot of these for an end thing. But it's something that if you play LARPs or you get into LARPs, like this is the kind of thing that happens a lot. You de-roll, you process feelings, and you take specific time to do that sort of thing. I also really like doing affirmations, which is just, however you decide to employ that, telling people things that you really liked about how they played tonight or about how something went. And whether that's the GM or other players, like, specifically complimenting people like, oh my gosh, that scene, where you died or whatever, like, it was amazing. Like, it was so cool. That was the most amazing thing ever, giving that kind of just, out of story support and kudos, I think, to everybody. Like, it's just really uplifting and reassuring, like, that everybody's like on board and having fun and like really into this.
Yeah, and that can be the free form version like you're talking about, or that can be something more structured, like roses and thorns and stars and wishes. Like, those are some of the other techniques. If you're not familiar, you can certainly Google those. But those are like kind of more structured ways to provide critique of the game and feedback about a game.
Right. Yeah. And which is the thing I was going to lead into, was critiques from there. Yeah.
Yeah. I do a very informal one. I just ask people like, did you guys have a good time tonight? Like I always ask that question when I'm, when I'm finishing up a game, right? I'll even ask that at a convention, like, did everyone have fun? Like, did you have a good time?
Yeah.
I think another one, which wasn't on the list, which I just want to add really quick, is also, there are kind of post-game mechanical things that need to be done, like the awarding of experience, spending of experience, leveling up. Not necessarily the whole action of leveling up. Like you might take that home and do it.
Yeah.
But for instance, for my Forbidden Lands game, And again, this is somewhat ritualized, but one of the things that we do when we're ready to be done with the game is about 15 minutes before our end time, I will kind of pause where we are. I will note in my GM notes where the next session will take place, like when on the calendar, what time of day, like the action of the players. And then the next thing I do is Forbidden Lands has a set of questions that you ask, and for every yes on that list, players get an experience point. So we do experience. Mm-hmm. Then characters will take a few minutes and look at like, oh, I think I'll buy this, I'll raise this, I'm going to pick up this talent kind of thing. And that's kind of our cue to start leading out of the game.
Yeah.
I have another one because it's also not on the list. But part of your end ritual can be to set the date for your next game.
Right. Not even necessarily the date, but any planning that you need to do for the next game, right? And sometimes that means like our next session, like we know we're going to sit down and do XYZ. And sometimes it means it's like, hey guys, next session is the conclusion to this game, so we really need everybody to be here.
Yep.
Or sometimes it's like, what do you want to play next, my friends? That one happens a lot in my group.
Yeah, I mean, another one might be like, hey, I know we're scheduled to play, in 2 weeks, but in 2 weeks it's Christmas Eve. And so we're definitely not going to do that. Should we just skip a session? Should we reschedule? And we don't even have to settle that. But it's the kind of thing that like we can start talking about. But I often do like to just make sure that everybody knows, like, all right, cool. Like we'll be back in 2 weeks. That's, that's the 21st, whatever. Also to kind of trigger, like, obviously for holidays, people know, but like sometimes just saying like, hey, that's going to be the 21st. And somebody be like, oh, wait. I'm going to be out of town on the 21st, and be like, oh, all right, well, okay, should we play, should we? Yeah. So that can also be part of your end ritual, is to kind of start to figure out what's coming next. Mm-hmm. Do we have anything else on that list?
No, I think, in fact, that was the one I tried to write down and failed, which we'll talk about in the outtakes.
The mysterious afternoon note.
Yes.
Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is making rituals, right?
Yeah. Build your own.
Yeah. So you could easily adopt other people's rituals, right? I adopted one of my rituals. I adopted from game designer John Wick, not movie assassin John Wick, different person completely.
Right, different one.
But John Wick, in one of his books, talked about he had a candle that he would light at the beginning of the session. I want to say this is Houses of the Blooded, or maybe this was just John Wick in general. But he had a candle that he would light at the beginning of the session that kind of denoted that once this candle was lit, we are in character, and we are talking in character, playing in character until the candle is extinguished. I had a similar need, which was I needed to kind of get my rambunctious table focused and not chit-chatting about memes and jokes and stuff. So I have this big-ass die. I think we've talked about this before, right? 96,
we have. Yes.
96 millimeter.
It's huge.
96 millimeter D6.
Huge.
Affectionately known by my game group as the big die.
Uh-huh.
Right. And so one of our rituals for one of my game groups, and for it actually, this ritual lasted a couple different campaigns, but you could sit and chit chat and tell stories and jokes, whatever, until I put the big die on the table. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that I just put it down like a judge's gavel and made everyone stop. Like I would pick up the big die and I would be like, is everybody ready? Mm-hmm. And then people would be like, yes. And I'd be like, cool. And I would put it down on the table. And then that was our cue, including myself, right? Not to chit chat about stuff.
Game focus time.
Yeah, and the thing that we did was we also had in the middle of the table some index cards, so that if people thought of something that they wanted to tell, like did you see this episode or this funny joke or whatever, they were encouraged while the die was on the table to just take an index card, write their thing down so that it got out of their head, right? Because a lot of times we say things because we're thinking them and we're afraid we're going to lose them, right? So write it down, take it out of your head, And then when we would take breaks, like we take a bio break or whatever, I would take the die off the table. And then we could resume our joking and chit chat. And then people would just basically grab their index cards and be like, oh, blah, 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 story, this TV show, whatever. And then once we kind of worked that out, I'd pick up the die again and be like, are we ready to resume? Everybody say yes. I put the die back down.
Yeah.
So my point to this is, besides just describing one of my table rituals, was like, you can totally take somebody else's table ritual and co-opt it to your own, right? Make it work for what you need it to do. But I think making your own rituals is like, there's like, if you think you need a ritual, you should custom make your own ritual.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is just thinking about, what do you want to accomplish, or what is the need of your table and or game that you want to fulfill by creating this ritual, right?
Yeah.
Or even just like, what kind of social contract do you want to create by having said ritual? Because like I said, when we talked about ending ritual stuff, it's interesting the kind of social contract that the almost standard end of a LARP is, right? Because when you walk into a LARP, I have an assumption that I'm going to have some sort of de-rolling at the end. We're probably going to hang out and give each other affirmations, right? Like those two things are probably like 90% going to happen. And there may be more other things too, right? Or they may happen in a different way than I've done them before or whatever. But like, so like that kind of thing, which is interesting because like that becomes a play culture thing, because it's a widespread enough ritual that everybody engages in.
Sure.
And so it's a way to be like, how do I want to approach play culture at my table? What do I want to enforce or give importance to? That's the kind of stuff I want to make sure ends up in my ritual.
Yeah, and I think, a like just doing a kind of a brainstorming exercise, like a needs assessment, right? Like what is, like, think to yourself when your game starts, like what's not happening that you need to happen in the game? Like perhaps like you forget to put the X card out. Right? Like you notice mid-game, you haven't put the X card out on the table and you're like, oh, I really need to remember before we start play, I need to put the X card out, right? This is a good candidate for your ritual, right? Yeah. Because your ritual is also going to help you remember things. Maybe your players aren't focused, or maybe people aren't into their characters by the time you jump into the game, and people are kind of like floundering around about like, oh yeah, like what are we doing? Or like, where's my character sheet? Or like, where's my die? Like, any of those things, right? Like lack focus, or they're not in the right headspace. But just brainstorm those things. Your group, the game you're playing, think about what's happening. And those are the kind of the bullets that you're going to want to put in there. And then the other thing is, to make it a ritual, right? What we talked about was we want an order to them. And I will say that it also helps to have some like either prop or gesture or wording that is repetitive, like that you use each time. Like the big die, like I could have just told everyone like, hey, everybody focus, right? But there's a significance to putting the die, like I could have, and you're watching me do it. No one else can see this,
I know.
Right?
There's a lot of big hand gestures of the big die happening.
But here's the thing. That's what it looked like when I did it at the table. I didn't just like take the die and slide it over onto the table. Like there's this big gesture where like I held it up over my head and then placed it on the table. That's part of the ritual, right? Because it's this visual cue that everybody sees the motion that I'm making and knows like we're transitioning into play. And the same thing when I took it off the table, it's the same, the same big action.
I mean, it's funny because we're adults here, right? But it's like similar in idea to that thing that they do in childcare where like the teacher goes quiet and holds up like the hand symbol, like the closed mouth hand symbol. And then all the kids, like as soon as they see it, they have to also hold up the hand symbol and they have to close their mouth. And then they hold up the closed thing, you know. So, like, but the reason that we do that stuff is because it works.
Well, I mean, my vampire game in the 90s had a much more elaborate opening ritual that involved closing blinds and darkening the room with, lighting candles. and, you know, I had a goblet of wine, right? Like that I took a sip from before starting play. Like these were like,
wow. And you say you wouldn't be into LARP.
I mean, look,
I disagree.
It was vampire in the 90s.
I disagree.
But those things, so that's the other part of the ritual, right? Like for it to feel like a ritual, it needs gestures, wording, props. If you want to tailor it to be specific to your game, there's ways to theme your ritual to your game. If your ritual is more generalized to your game group, there's ways to do that. And those are all cool, right? Like you want to, like what you don't want to do is you don't want to do something that kind of makes everyone laugh and kind of loses what you're, what you were trying to achieve.
Yeah, like careful if your ritual is lighting a candle, drinking a giant goblet of red wine. And
I gotta be honest. I don't think I could pull that off. I don't think I could pull that off today.
Yeah.
I don't think I could pull off.
I'm impressed that you did then.
We were really into vampire. Back
so
then.
That is actually a thing that I was going to say, right? Like one of the things with your ritual, and this is something you have to gauge about your group if you're creating one for long running play, is buy-in from the people at your table, right? So that it doesn't become something that is awkward or funny or like whatever it is that they're like, okay, cool. Like, hey guys, I keep saying guys, hey friends, I want to, create some sort of ritual to get us in and out of the game. This is what I'm thinking. Do you think that covers everything that we need? And like, are you on board with functionally doing it this way, right? Like you can communicate with your players. You don't have to create this in a vacuum. You
hardly,
can,
right?
But you don't have to. In fact, don't. You could, but don't.
I mean, it could simply be everybody close your eyes, take 3 slow breaths.
Yep.
And let's begin the game.
Right. Like to just let go of the day, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what we're going for here is the importance is you do want it to be a ritual, right? Because if all you're going to do is like, we're going to do a recap, I'll leave myself a Post-it note on my notes that says put out the X card or whatever. That's not really a pregame ritual. That's just you remembering to get your game started. But if you have a ritual that says like, okay, if everybody take three breaths, with their eyes closed, then we open our eyes, then I place the X card back out on the table and I have like a couple words as a reminder of what the X card is. And then I start the recap with previously, in our last session or previously in campaign X. That's your ritual. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's it. Yeah. But it's the predictable part, right? Because we monkey brain, right? Like everyone else at the table, for it to be effective is that once you have everybody close their eyes and take their deep breaths, they know the next thing will be to talk about the X card.
Yep.
Then we're going to do the recap.
Yep.
Then we start play.
Yep.
Right. And that's the transition.
Yep.
And then the same thing coming back out, right? Like having a way to signal like we're wrapping. We're done with play. And now we need to start coming back out and let's talk, let's talk about what we enjoyed. Let's do our experience points. Let's talk about what we enjoyed. Let's make sure we know what let's make sure we're set up for next session.
Yep.
Right. So it's that needs assessment coupled with what's your repetitive actions? Prop, phrasing, gesture, some combination of them.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts about how to mimic the concept of a prop for all of the online play that we're doing right now?
Actually, I think it's really hard, right? Like,
I think so too,
one of
which is why I was
one of
wondering. Yeah.
one of the challenges to online play right now is we're kind of losing some of those things. So, for instance, what you could do in the form of a prop for something like Roll20 is you could bring up an image, right? So I could bring up an image, show to players that maybe, I don't know, it's the symbol of our game. Or, like you said before, when you reminded me, like opening credit thing, like if I can stream a video,
Yeah. It's
right?
cool.
Like if I'm on Zoom and I can share my screen, then I could do I could from my screen, I could play the opening sequence, and then that would get everybody set to go. Roll20 has a way to play music through Roll20. So there's ways to do that. So maybe your prop is a song.
Right. Audio. Shared audio.
So,
The theme song for the campaign.
right. But like
Jax.
right. Like for instance, right now, playing in Zoom, like the big die thing doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Like I'm not using it right now, but like it won't work because even if I make the gesture, if somebody's not looking at the screen right away or whatever, you're not going to see it. And then once I put it down, you're not going to see the die. Like it loses that effectiveness. Likewise, I can't, dim my room to candles for Vampire because, you won't
and
see me.
no one could see you.
Right. Like,
It's interesting. So I've been playing games on Discord using the Discord audio and video.
Sure.
And the interesting thing about that is because you have multiple rooms, you can actually transition from one video room to another. So you can do things like have an out of character room, right? Like go set everything up, and then you can be like, cool, now we're going to go into the game room.
Yeah, that's really good. That
Right?
could be part of your ritual, right? Like, all right, everybody switch over over to the game room. Like
Yeah.
we're done here. We'll come back when we take a break.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's actually really good. Yeah, I think
here when we're not in game.
I think online is creating a it's not a challenge.
We're looking for solutions to problems that we weren't as major before because they were more limited in scope. Now we are broadly facing these issues as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I solved these problems differently when I was at a face-to-face table. I could solve these problems now. If I need a ritual, verbal is probably going to be my strong point for an online game, because verbal is the thing that I know I have no matter what, right? Like if you're not looking at my camera, you can still hear me. If I use the same phrases, the same words, like that's going to connect. So
Yeah.
cool. I feel like we've done this topic a good service. Do you
Yeah.
do you have
I'm with
any
you.
final thoughts?
I don't actually think that I do, other than I've been finding more and more that I enjoy rituals for starting and ending stuff. And I actually appreciate them probably the most in situations where I'm not familiar with the other people that I'm playing with, because I do think that it's really good for setting tone for table contract, social contract, table structure.
Yeah, I think if a GM has their own rituals, like I do ritualize my starting and endings of con games.
Oh yeah, me too.
So that may not be familiar to the players who are sitting at the table.
But it is to me.
But I go through a thing which helps me center myself. And in some ways calm myself, as running for strangers.
Yes.
But it also makes sure that I don't forget stuff.
Yep.
Right? Like I don't forget to introduce the X card, or I don't forget to tell you about a certain part of the world.
Yep. Yeah.
So, all right, good. With that, we actually have a closing ritual for this podcast,
Which I am going to ruin again.
which begins with you telling us about a show on the network, and then we use that to transition into our closing bits. And really, the part that's impressive, which I don't know if people pay attention to, is that we could have easily a long time ago recorded one of those
Right.
and dropped it at the end of every episode, but because
do
we
we?
love you,
No.
we
Yes.
do it fresh every time.
Bespoke.
Bespoke ending every damn time. All right. I've hopefully bought you enough time. Tell me about a show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yeah. So on Down with D&D, you can listen to Sean Merwin, the Mad Wizard Sean Merwin, and Teos talking about all of the D&D stuff forever and always with like all of the latest and greatest information all the time. Can you tell that this is also bespoke? Because I am not looking at the blurbs.
Yes, I really could.
But that's what they do, and it's
They do
good stuff.
That
so
is
if
what
D&D
that is in a nutshell. That is what they do.
If D&D is your thing, D&D all the time, every day, or just sometimes even, but you want to know the latest information, Down with D&D is the show for you.
Absolutely. Say, Senda, where can people find us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us on the Misdirected Mark forums, which is forums.misdirectedmark.com, or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they have that information or wrote it down or followed us or whatever, what can they do with it?
Yeah, you should leave us a topic. Ask us to discuss something. Andrew did this week and just dropped it in our Slack room, which we'll talk about how to get to the Slack room in a second. Dropped it in our Slack room, and we just ran with it. I'd like to tell you that there's some formula, some rhyme or reason for how we pick topics, but I swear it's whatever catches my attention on any given day, which is why sometimes you mail them in and we do them right away, and sometimes you mail them in and it takes like
6 months later.
Yeah, months later. Like, it's whatever catches my fancy, and this one just popped up in the Slack room, and I was like, well, we're doing this one this Monday. So anyway, leave us a topic, a question, something you want us to talk about. We really, really, really pride ourselves on doing the show about the things that you find interesting, because one, we hopefully are entertaining you, but we are also very much hoping that we are helping you. And we like to provide that helpful advice, insight, etc., that we hope we bring to the show besides just our charming personalities and Senda's giggles.
We have chemistry, though. People say we have chemistry. Carry on.
Yes, indeed. Chemistry, indeed. If you like what we do here or elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider supporting our Patreon campaign. Go to patreon.com/MMP. Patrons of the show get access to the after show from this show, which used to be the bonus outtakes, but we don't edit. So it's the after show from this show, the after show from Misdirected Mark. And going back to what I was saying before, it gives you access to our Slack room for life, which is a great collection of fantastic gamers and humans. You can leave us topics. You can engage in all manner of discussion. You can talk about recipes. You can join our Friday luncheon call, which we do on Zoom with our patrons, where I host a luncheon on East Coast time. So pick your own meal, cocktail or whatever, depending on where you are around the world. Second breakfast for you, cocktails for Andrew, etc. But anyway, we really appreciate your patronage. Everything that we do is possible because of the patrons who support the show, the network, etc. So we are eternally grateful for your support. If you are already supporting the Patreon campaign, thank you very much. And if you're unable to support the Patreon campaign, which we totally understand, there is still another thing you can do. Another thing that you can do that is super helpful for the show. It supports our scientifically proven, though not statistically significant yet, scientifically proven, not statistically significant, yet important activity, which is, if you listen to us, you will love us. What is that thing?
Well, you could leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help new people find the show. which is both awesome. And also, if you let us know that you left us a review somewhere, we will go read it because we love them and we love you for leaving them. And also, just to highlight that we do this fresh every time, every week I have to say the words new review close together in a row, and it's a freaking tongue twister. So we do this for you.
We do indeed.
Thank you so much for everyone who's already left a review. You're all amazing. And it really does actually help new people find the show, which is great. Or you can just like tag a friend on Twitter. Like that's cool too. And seeing that a lot recently, which is also fantastic.
Super helpful.
Yeah. Cool.
Say, Senda, show me your favorite ritual.
This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh?
Bloopy.
Click, click, click. All right. No nonsense. No nonsense.
No nonsense.
Nothing up front. We'll put it all into the after show
Yes.
thingy at the end.
Okay.
Are you good?
I'm good.
All right.
Do,
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 do, do, do, do, do, do, do, do, do.